He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, welcome to the show. We got a big interview with Marissa Streit, the CEO of Prager U, coming up, who is just one of the coolest people in the country, and you will enjoy getting to know her. Also, one of the most productive leaders, I would say, in the conservative movement, fighting on behalf of children who are our future. The cliche is true. And we don't spend quite enough time on the show talking about education, which is maybe the biggest issue other than immigration. And we're going to do so today in a little bit. But first, let's get to the news. We have an exclusive interview with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. At Breitbart, Matt Boyle sat down with him yesterday. We're just starting to roll out verticals or stories from that. And he takes shots at the UN for calling it antagonistic on Ukraine versus Russia and how they're not helping President Trump end the war. But I think the most compelling one for me from the interview is he says flat out, not serious to talk about Ukraine becoming nuclear armed. Ukraine is now angling for nukes because they know they're not getting into NATO. They were armed and then they disarmed, so they don't have a nuclear arsenal right now. We don't want any more nukes in the world, period. And I think that arming Ukraine with nuclear weapons seems like the sort of thing that could potentially lead to actual nuclear war. Feels like Cuban missile crisis type vibes. And it's very interesting to see a lot of the crowd that spent most of my adult life and my early formative years in politics decrying nuclear weapons who will be totally tolerant of Zelensky talking that way. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's all art of the deal negotiations stuff, but Zelensky's not as good of a negotiator as our commander-in-chief, Donald Trump. So we got to keep a close eye on it. But Rubio says we need fewer nuclear-armed countries, not more, and just shuts it down flat out. So that's a good one. We got that up for you, and more to come on that front. Putin's done an interesting move, which is he's trying to undercut Zelensky's deal by offering U.S. minerals from Ukraine. So Trump wants Ukraine's minerals, and Putin had a pretty interesting move, which is he said, well, we'll just take the territory and we'll take the minerals. So it's not going to be a easily negotiated peace. I think Putin, who is more pragmatic and more rational than he's given credit for from the establishment media. Not to say I have a lot of nice stuff to say about him, so you always got to throw in those caveats. Not a big Putin guy. But I do think that ultimately he might be compelled to do what's natural, what's pragmatic, and that's ending the war. But he needs to be able to save face. And so Trump saying that we're going to take a bunch of Ukraine's minerals is not going to sit well with Putin. Putin is going to say, hey, we'll take over that territory, we'll be in charge, and we'll cut you in on it. So that's a new wrinkle in that negotiation, which is ongoing, and we'll continue to keep you posted at Breitbart News. But it is such an important proxy against China for us to get additional rare earth minerals and those sort of resources, to control those as much as we can, because it does help us stand up to China, which it dominates in that marketplace now, and we're dependent on them. That leaves us very vulnerable, and Trump seeing a plan for us to get them is really, really good. So, but Putin had an interesting chess move, and we will continue to bring those forth at Breitbart News when as that situation develops. We get more good news on the media front. The golden age is here of media. MSNBC has canceled 3 more shows that no one watched, according to a report that I saw in the New York Post. Jonathan Capehart, Katie Fang, who I'd never heard of, and Ayman Moyeldin, who I'd never heard of, have all lost MSNBC shows. Capehart's Washington Post guy, very hard left, and I'm not feeling with the others, but I'm guessing they didn't get ratings if they're getting fired. But it's all great. So Joy Reid's out. Maddow is being forced to broadcast more. Maddow was kind of melting down on her show. She's permitted to emote more than some of the others. I noticed this while I was researching Breaking the News when I really took a deep dive into MSNBC. I do 3 case studies in Breaking the News that are really interesting for different reasons. I spend a lot of time in the New York Times investigating their business structure, their newsroom, the way it works, because of their a power like no other in American media. There still is, and still the most powerful entity in American media. I think I guess you can make a case it's Fox, but it really is the New York Times in my view. MSNBC, because it basically is state-run media for the Democrats, and I thought that overlap was so profound. It was worth looking into it, and I realized it was really all about preserving the status quo for NBC, Comcast, Universal, the conglomerate, and that's what it was about. It wasn't about liberalism or democracy or anything like that. It was about making sure that things were going well for that giant conglomerate. I also spent a lot of time on Bloomberg, which I thought was unique because they're pretty much a monopoly in a lot of the business space. And also Michael Bloomberg literally ran for president. So that was kind of amazing that you would have a media mogul run for president. You want to talk about fusion between media and the public sphere. The private sphere and the public sphere together. It's pretty interesting. So also their subservience to China was so shocking when it comes to Bloomberg. But anyway, digging into Rachel Maddow, she's a hysteric, and she's portrayed as this Rhodes Scholar. She's very smart. She's very erudite. That's not really her appeal. Her appeal is emotional. She emotes to her audience, and she makes them feel like they're following along. They're voyeuristic. They're a fly on the wall inside someone's just their internal monologue. And she goes into full internal monologue, but public, externalizing her internal monologue on her show yesterday. These clips are unbelievable. Let me play this for you.
PM hour, all the other nights except for Mondays. So that's a big change. An even bigger programming change is at 7 p.m., 7 p.m. Eastern, where Joy Reid's show, The Readout, ended tonight. And Joy is not taking a different job in the network. She is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her.
So, but this is part of the problem. This is what they don't understand. A lot of lefts is doing this, where they're not getting that some of the stuff that people are rejecting are the things they hold the most dear. So Joy Reid is just a content creation machine for us on the right because she's so absurd. She's so emphatically wrong so often. Her whole presentation, her anger, her copying of Donald Trump's haircut, where she got a yellow Donald Trump hair. Like it's all so, it's like a cartoon. And so maybe Maddow loves Joy Reid, but it is not doing well for business. It is not making the network look good, and she's not getting ratings, or else she would be staying. So why is Maddow doing this sort of emotional, it's like she's on a therapist's couch, but it's good TV. I'm playing it. I'm giving her publicity. So I get it. She's got a sense of television, but it's also weird to admit all this stuff.
I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And
oh, we all do. We all have so much more to learn. It's interesting because Reid is also a homophobe and Maddow is a lesbian. So Reid does not like homosexuals. You could tell from all the blog posts that I reported on in Breaking the News, and I read from on yesterday's show. So I don't know if Maddow's got a good read on Joy Reid.
Personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad.
Are you telling me that Rachel Maddow is calling the bosses at NBC News racist? Because that's what I just heard. Is that what you guys just heard? I'll play it back a few seconds. Let's see.
I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible.
Indefensible. So the racists now have taken over at NBC, Comcast, Universal. It's so amazing. They're all such victims. We're making seven figures to get mediocre ratings and to not help the country and not help their political party, not help their businesses. They were being totally unproductive. Why does she feel like they're all entitled to jobs? Well, because of their skin tone. They're entitled to their primetime slot in NBC because of their skin tone is darker. That's her implication. She's a genius, guys. She's a Rhodes Scholar. I just love it. I love the infighting. Could you guys picture if one of my hosts, like Matt Boyle or Mike Slater or someone came out because we wanted to shake some stuff up at Breitbart and they took to the airwaves and a Breitbart branded show and said, you know what? The brass at Breitbart, they made some big mistakes and they're all racist. Do you know how unfathomable that would be? That they would do that? Of course, they would never do that. And then I don't even know how I would react because it would never happen, but I certainly wouldn't be tolerated. We're very open-minded and free speech, but if you're a representative of the company and you just go and you trash the company as racist and on our own airwaves, it's very audacious. It's very audacious. I guess that's why she pulls in those ratings.
And I do not defend it. But there's just one other piece of it that you should know. From your side of the TV screen, you will mostly see changes in terms of who's in the anchor chair. And actually, everybody who's going to be in anchor chairs from here on out are great colleagues and great at what they do, and you are not going to be disappointed.
But they might not be black enough. Don't forget that.
Disappointed in who's on our air and what you're going to be seeing. But one thing you cannot necessarily see is that the people who get our shows on the air, they're really being put through the ringer. Dozens of producers and staffers, including some who are among.
All right. This is getting boring, but I want to say that there's a counter to this, and I'm going to turn to the man who looks just like Rachel Maddow, Mark Cuban, to explain.
If you gave the Democrats a dollar bill and said you can sell these for 50 cents, they would hire 50 people to decide if they really to try to figure out how to do it, and then would not know how to sell a dollar bill for 50 cents. If you gave it to Donald Trump and said, sell this dollar bill for $2, he'd figure out a way, right? He'd tell you that $2 bill is huge. I learned that the Democrats can't sell worth.
Okay, so this actually refutes Nolte's theory that Rachel Maddow and Mark Cuban are the same, because that's the exact opposite argument. Rachel Maddow is all the Democrats are victims, are all amazing people. There's so much we can learn from them. And then Mark Cuban is saying, no, these guys can't sell anything. Their ideas are terrible and they need to shake up. So I'll have to break that to Nolte. Maddow and Cuban are not the same as the conspiracy theorists believed. I got a little more Maddow, which I think is really important when you see the sniveling nature of this.
Maybe all of our folks, including most of the people who are getting this very show on the air right now, maybe they will all get new jobs here, and I hope they do. But in the meantime, being put in this kind of limbo, the anxiety and the discombobulation is off the charts at a time when this job already is extra stressful and difficult. It is not news for me to tell you that the press and freedom of the press are under attack in a way that is really.
Yeah, freedom press under attack. That's what the money's for, Rachel. It's the stress. You got $30 million last year to host a low-rated show, and the main goal of the show, we all know the truth, is to get Democrats elected, and you failed in that regard. You didn't get them elected. They did very poorly. Your chosen candidates did badly. Your ratings were not that good. You only worked one day a week because you were so arrogant. You thought you guys could win it one day a week. You have $30 million to do that. Maybe it was really stressful one day a week, but a lot of people go under a lot more stress, physical stress, worrying about if they're going to be able to pay bills, something you'll never have an issue with. And those people don't get to broadcast it to millions of people online, their grievances and their gripes with management. Just live in a bubble. Delicious stuff. Cuban's point It's really interesting how Democrats can't sell anything. It's really the Republicans and the Democrats. It's just Trump is unique in his efficiency. It's interesting to watch him and other effective CEOs in my life. They all just make decisions very quickly, and they come up with game plans. And then they play speed chess. It's not just playing chess. They play blitz, where they're playing 5-minute games. So that's how they're doing it. And that's what works. And Trump moves fast, and that's how he learns how to sell stuff. So they all need to learn how to mine. They all need to learn how to mine or create, use AI. That's what they all got to do. Remember how insensitive that was when they were telling people who were losing manufacturing jobs to learn to code? Well, they all need to learn how to mine stuff, because we're drilling, baby. We're getting stuff out of the earth. They can go over to Ukraine, do some of the rare earth mining we're going to need. Who cares? These people stink. Yeah, but I love it. Indefensible non-white host ousted. The judge denied the Associated Press an emergency motion to restore their White House access. It's just so absurd. Is it Trump kicked them out because they're lying about the Gulf of America, insisting on calling it the Gulf of Mexico, which is not. It's Gulf of America. AP's dying on this hill for some reason. We don't need them. They're just redundant, their coverage of all the other left-wing outlets in the press briefing. You don't get a permanent spot in the press briefing room. You guys have to understand how small that room is. That room is as big as the upstairs of my house. It is a tiny, tiny room, and we mostly keep it for historical purposes because it is super cool. You've all seen the press briefings on air. It's just super cool in there, but it is a way too small of a room. There's no permanent spots, no permanent spot for Breitbart. We crush the AP across social media. Does that matter? We reach millions and millions of households. The AP doesn't, and we syndicate the AP. So they should not be entitled to space. And judges denied it temporarily. I love it. I'm not optimistic that they'll be able to keep the AP out for long, but I think it's fun, and it doesn't make the freedom of press under attack. It means that the president's allowed to use some tools in his toolkit that he hasn't used before, which is that if you're going to intentionally lie and smear just to distract from his agenda, then it's not that you can't cover him, it's that you're not going to be at the front of the line the way the AP has been. I'm absolutely fine with that. Let them keep trying to find their footing. They are still trying to find their footing. Democrats continuing to not know how to message to the public. Here's Pramila Jayapal, one of the most left-wing members of the Congress. I thought you guys would get a kick out of this clip.
We can't let them continue their lies and their distractions. We can't let them deport the millions of families across this country who have been doing the work that keeps our economy going every day. We can't let them scapegoat and criminalize immigrants who contribute, who are our neighbors, our friends, our churchgoers, our community around us that we deeply love. Immigrants are us. Immigrants are us, and we all deserve respect and dignity. Right. If you look at the food that's on your table, think about who picked it. If you
guys like that, look at the food on your table, think about who picked it. She likes that second-class citizen casting of our immigrant class. Here's how disingenuous it is to call them immigrants. They're really not necessarily immigrants at all. A lot of them are transitory migrants. And they're certainly aliens. And we're specifically taking issue with illegal aliens. Now, we don't want to expand immigration in the legal sense. So, I mean, there's some technicality maybe, but we're not talking about immigrants per se. We're talking about illegal aliens. People who broke our laws to come here and who, by and large, are a massive drain on the system and have only been tolerated because they drive down the wages of some American workers, which benefits our corporations. It doesn't benefit the corporations. It benefits not the culture of the corporations, but it benefits the C-suites, their bookkeeping they have to do, and it benefits Democrat voter rolls. That's why it's been like this, and we're fed up with it. We're not tolerating it anymore. And as I mentioned in yesterday's show, the polling is overwhelmingly supportive of deportation, 62% right now. So we like the deportation. So stop acting like we only care about immigrants. It's not immigrants. It's illegal aliens that we're focused on. And you only want them because you want them to pick the food to put on your table. Does she know how bad that sounds? I don't think she does, right? They're clueless as part of the nature of being Democrat this day and age. More cluelessness. Musk has Trump support with his email requesting for what people are really doing at work. So this came up over the weekend. I love it. Just asking people, what did you do last week? And this was met with outrage and consternation by the left and by the people who back the bureaucracy no matter what. There's a federal technology staffers are resigning rather than help Musk and Doge. I love this stuff. So I think one of the issues where it got us into trouble is sort of a deep state saboteur type behavior. So Musk is trying to clean up he's trying to clean up everything, but firing the guy who opens the bathrooms at Yellowstone, that was a mistake. But I bet it wasn't Musk who did that. I bet there was some mid-level person who was tasked with doing some sort of firing, and they fired the one guy with the key to the bathroom at Yellowstone. Like that's sabotage or stupidity. So those mid-level people, if you want to help, get out of the way, please. But Trump backs Musk's move, which I like. I think that's really great. I think it's something that is very, very helpful overall, that Trump is showing support for that, because I think that's a great initiative, and we cannot be cowed by the media who acted like something that was very routine, was very outrageous. All right, so Kash Patel is also going to be the ATF director. He's the acting director of the ATF now, which it sounds cool, and it is. But just wondering why it seems like Trump's hiring process is going a little slower than I would have thought. They move very quickly in the cabinet level positions, but I think slower on other positions, the things that require a Senate confirmation. And now that Kash has been Senate confirmed, he can be an acting anything. So this goes on for, I think he gets like 7 months leeway on this. So, and Democrats hate this, which is great. So, and that'll help whoever Trump puts up next get confirmed very quickly, because they won't want Kash to have the job, because Kash is as hated as anyone by the Democrats. So it's great. So I like all those moves. Very clever, just like Trump putting himself in charge of the Kennedy Center. Let Kash Patel do the FBI and the ATF. Fine. I didn't say yesterday, I should have given a congrats to our broadcasting colleague, Dan Bongino, who does a great job with his podcast and Rumble, and he's going to be deputy FBI director. I should have given him a shout out yesterday, and that slipped my mind. I congratulate Dan and apologize for not doing it yesterday. Kind of a mild apology, but it's great. It's a good thing. He's a good man, and he's got a good background in this stuff, NYPD and Secret Service. So perfect. Committed, loyal, good communicator. Top two things for Trump. Are you loyal? Are you a good communicator? Those two things. Speaking of, Vivek Ramaswamy announced his run for Ohio governor, leading Ohio to be the state of excellence. I mentioned this again. I mentioned it yesterday's show, but we got an exclusive with him at Breitbart. And it's noteworthy how early he's announced. And I think this is a sign of things to come. I think that what's going to happen is that there's not going to be much of a primary season in a lot of corners for 2026 in the Republican Party. And I want to explain my theory on this, because Trump's already endorsed Vivek, endorsed him right away, gave him a complete and total endorsement almost immediately. And this indicates to me that there's deep coordination at the highest levels of the Republican Party right now, that they don't want to distract from Trump's agenda. And I think they want to settle a lot of potential primary squabbles between establishment and anti-establishment right away. So I think you're going to see a lot of Trump-backed candidates get into races early. You're going to see Trump world consolidate behind those candidates early, insist they're inevitable, and discourage any sort of a challenge whatsoever. There will be some challenges, but I think they're going to go for a shock and awe approach, get people fundraising early, and make it clear who the president supports, because this is going to clear out a lot of space that normally would, media space, would be dedicated towards literal politicking. And that could be spent on Trump's agenda. So this is my prediction that this is going to happen. There's going to be exceptions. I'm very interested in what's going on in Kentucky, which is already shaping up. People are framing it as a proxy war between McConnell world and Trump world, with McConnell world backing Daniel Cameron and a Trump world backing a guy named Nate Morris. It's really interesting because, remember, Daniel Cameron spoke at the 2020 RNC and did a great job, but has praised McConnell in the past. Nate Morris is a guy who I had not heard of until last week. And I look at my X account and everyone is saying how great Nate Morris is. We've done a couple stories on him at Breitbart that are very positive. I'll probably end up having everyone on the show if there really is a primary, and we will talk to them and we will have great conversations, I'm sure. But it's really interesting the way that's being framed. It's being framed as Trump world's picked their guy already. McConnell world's picked their guy. I don't even know if that's the reality. I'm just saying that's how it's being framed. It's happening similarly in Florida, where you've got Byron Donalds already out there and Trump basically endorsing him. Donalds is not even declared quite yet, which allows for huge fundraising opportunities. If you time the fundraising just right, you declare it at a specific moment, and that can really optimize all the various ways you can fundraise. We can get into those mechanics at a different time. But this is a very interesting moment from Ron DeSanctimonious from the other day that I wanted to play. Check this out.
Plan to endorse the congressman, and if not, who are you looking at and why?
My view is Donald Trump just got into office. I want these congressmen focused on enacting his agenda. They haven't done very much yet. They're not putting his executive orders into place. We'll see what they do on the spending, but we have such a narrow majority that to be trying to campaign other places and missing these votes, I think is not something that's advisable at all.
Okay, so you see what he's doing here. So first of all, the executive branch is not in charge of enacting executive orders, so I don't know what that's about. And he's taking a shot at any Congress people who are campaigning instead of voting because it is a very narrow congressional majority. It's not a terrible attack, but this is an attack on Byron Donalds because Byron Donalds, a congressman, a vital vote with such a narrow majority. And DeSantis is saying, which is very sanctimonious of him, he's a terrific governor, the number one governor in the country. So it's true. But this is why I still cling to the DeSantis nickname, is because this is a sanctimonious standpoint. He's saying, how dare you try to run for the office that I've been holding and enjoying because we had a narrow majority and you should be at work in the Congress. Now, I'm pretty sure DeSantis was a congressman when he was running for governor, so he's not really one to talk on this one. But what's really between the lines is there's a lot of chatter that Casey DeSantis, Ron's wife, would be a Democrat challenger to Donald. I'm sorry, Republican challenger, forgive me. So a primary challenger to Donald's. So that could be a legitimate race. I met Casey DeSantis one time, and she was very impressive. She's a poised person, and she's very appealing. I'm sure she would do similar policies to DeSantis. I'm sure she'd be a decent governor. But Byron Donalds is fan favorite. Someone who I like personally, someone who's going to get Trump's official endorsement if he hasn't already. And this could be seen as a proxy war between Trump versus whatever the DeSantis family represents at this point. So just read between the lines about what's going on. But I really bring this to the audience's attention because I'm piecing together a pattern that I think Trump is going to want a lot of this stuff settled quick. I don't think he's going to want a lot of the air, a lot of the oxygen for his agenda to get sucked out of the room by squabbling. I don't think he wants that to happen. I think he wants to present a unified party because that will help him get stuff done and help him deal with the hostile press, et cetera. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's why you saw the Vivek endorsement right away. It's why you're seeing some of these early intensity in Kentucky, and I think that's why you're going to see, Byron Donalds consolidate a lot of support very quickly for the governor race in Florida, and that could be at the expense of the DeSantis family, even though Ron DeSantis is very good at governing. I think that makes sense, right? It's pretty good. I think it's a good summary. It's an important summary. So anyway, I'm curious to see if it all works out according to plan, because it might not. Particularly in that Kentucky race, because I feel like that one could get more complicated. But it's very interesting to watch all of it play out. All right. I want to tell you guys about a couple fantastic sponsors. One of them is Solaire infrared grills, best hot grills that you could get, besthotgrill.com. I, over the weekend, celebrated on Saturday having a day to myself and only 3 of my kids by making a Wellington. I made a welly. Beef welly. And the first step with the Wellington is you've got to get that perfect sear on the filet mignon, Chateaubriand, whatever you're using, that, that center of the filet mignon of that loin that you're using to make the dish. And I went straight outside to my Solaire infrared grill. Thing heats up in 3 minutes. I think I gave it 5 just to be sure. And you get that perfect sear without cooking on the inside. And then I could slow cook it in that oven once I'd assembled all the 50 million steps it takes to get the Wellington. I did not nail the Wellington. The flavors were fantastic. I did not get all the textures right. But step 1 for me, it's already part of my routine, incorporating it. Got that perfect sear with the hottest grill you can get, the Solaire infrared grills. BestHotGrill.com. I'm recommending it. I'm using it, and it is a constant now for me since I got it. Made in America, good people, easy to support. Other thing that's part of my routine, especially when I feel like I'm a little sore, recovery's going slow, is the Juvent Micro Impact Platform, Juvent. People don't always get the spelling, juvent.com/Marlow to learn more. But this is part of how I'm recovering from all of the physical labor that I do. I really do a lot of stuff physically. First of all, I'm in the gym, I'm working out hard, and I go hard. It's one of my keys to staying in shape. Is I don't do this. A lot of people work out way too soft. I go hard. I've always got a child on my back. Yesterday, I had all 4 kids, solo kid duty, and I've got a baby on my back while I'm bathing, bending over, bathing the other 3 kids while I'm trying to cook dinner, which is I did something stupid as a parent where I gave my kids the option of choosing their dinner last night. Never do this. You just serve them. There was, of my 3 children who speak, they requested, I think, 7 different types of dinner. It was actually 6. It was at least, one of them had 3 requests, one had 2, and one had 1. So I think I made 4, which was really not wise. It's not great parenting. But I will tell you, I did all this with the baby on my back, and I know I've got the confidence to help myself recuperate with the Juvent Micro Impact technology that I'm using. So what it does is it provides this cutting edge science to deliver these micro impacts. It's sort of like a vibration, but that's not exactly what it is. It helps your bone health stay strong, helps with stiff muscles. It helps you recuperate. It's especially good if you're older and you're having some bone loss, bone density issue. Remember, it was developed for those at NASA astronauts while they were doing their spacewalks, come back with weakened bones. But I'll tell you, it does work for people like me who are just active and are constantly putting your body under stress, not just from working out, but the labor of the day, the constantly picking babies up off the ground. Not a great move. It's a very realistic way. It's an easy way for me to stay up on my health, giving my bones what they need. It's part of my routine. After pickup from Master Marlow Jr., I'm in there on the Juvent, 20 minutes, leading conference calls, scrolling through email, responding to things. Super pleasant part of my day, and I look forward to it, actually, and it's good for me. Juvent.com/Marlow, Juvent.com/Marlow, $500 off, 10-year limited warranty, and financing options available. No brainer to try it. They'll buy it back from you if you don't like it. So check it out. All right, let's get into that interview with Marissa Streit. Check it out. All right, President Trump is moving at lightning speed in his first weeks in office with executive orders, new policies, promises kept. It can be hard to keep up until now. Subscribe to the Trump Report. This daily email brings you highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Get all the details on the administration's top actions that day with in-depth analysis. You stay up to date on what President Trump is doing to make America great again. Subscribe to the Trump Report today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. That's SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. Get that up-to-the-minute email every single day with Salem. All right. One of my favorite people in the world is Marissa Streit from Prager U, who is the CEO there. And it's one of my favorite groups, and it's only run by terrific people. We're talking Dennis, Alan Estrin, and Marissa. These are just some of the greatest warriors. And it just so happens that we're also sort of neighbors. We occupy the same little portion of the Los Angeles area, which is always a delight. Marissa, it's really nice that you're making time for us on the Alex Marlow Show. I just want to start with a little biographical background, because you're someone who is really one of the, I think, most important people in the conservative movement right now. I don't know if you had pictured yourself in that role 5 or 6 years ago, but your background is unbelievable. I just want people to get to know you if they haven't got to yet at all.
Well, thank you so much. I've always been a troublemaker, and education has always been my passion. So I guess it's no surprise that I'm an education troublemaker here at the belly of the beast in Los Angeles, like you. So I don't know if I planned on doing what I'm doing, but I also think that I had that bug in me that when I see children being bullied, which is what the education system in America has been doing, I could not sit idly by, given that I've known what I've known for so many years.
So you have you were in the IDF, correct?
In the IDF a very long time ago, so over 20 years ago, but it is very possible that's where I got some of my courage to fight against bullies.
But that's really interesting because I have conversations with people who are in the service or were in the service, and I share with them that I don't have that sort of physical bravery. And I'm really appreciative of them because I don't personally have that. That's not my hardwiring. But I know I'm brave in other ways. I offer myself up to a generally non-supportive media public every single day. And that's fine to fight for the values I care about. But you've got both. That's kind of cool.
I don't know that I would say I'm physically so brave. I served in the Israeli intelligence, so I mostly had to use my brain and my discernment. But what I did pick up from living in Israel as an American and serving in the military is that when you really love your country, you find whatever blessings you have and you lean in to protect your country. And in Israel, it's no choice. You have to do that because the country is so small, and so they need everybody. And I think that when we look at that experience as Americans, and if we can learn anything from Israel, is that we have to lean in and protect our country. Freedom isn't free, and this is our country to protect, and nobody else will protect it except for us. And so I think that living in Israel and learning that firsthand, seeing other Israelis step in, giving 2 years of their lives, figuring out what they're good at, whether they're physically strong or mentally strong, intellectually strong, and leaning in truly to protect their country, I think should be an inspiration to us as Americans. Let's all do what we can to protect this incredible country that we've been born to.
Well, speak to my audience here about the importance of America's relationship with Israel, because I'm an America First guy. I think we're in way too many foreign entanglements. I think the majority of our entanglements in this century have unfortunately been a product of the military-industrial complex and all of those defense contractor money flowing through Washington, D.C. I hate to say it, but I lived in Washington and I found that to be the case. I do find Israel to be a huge exception. And I think some of what we witnessed in the last week or so with the Bibis babies and the way Hamas not only slaughtered them, but then made a mockery of them during the transfer of their bodies. Stuff like that just shows you that we're dealing with a colossal evil in that region that is not the same as, Ukraine, Russia. It's just totally different. But I want to get your perspective as someone who served in the IDF and now is an entrepreneur in America.
Alex, I'm raising my kids here in the United States. I'm not planning on moving back to Israel. This is my country here, America. And so I'm as America First as it gets. And so what we need to discern is, when should the United States get involved in geopolitical issues around the world, and how is it in our own benefit? If you look at what is happening in Israel, they are effectively the Iron Dome of the West. They are being attacked by jihadists who not only hate Israel, but actually hate the West, hate America. You don't need to play any sort of guessing game to figure that out. They actually flat out say that. It's in their Hamas charter. It's in their jihad charter. They say that they are starting with the, little Satan, and the big Satan is America. And so while the first frontier is in Israel, and while Israelis are fighting some of that war first for us, we can't be blind enough to know that, or to think that they're not going to come after us as well. So that's why I call Israel the Iron Dome of the West, because they are absorbing all of those arrows before truly they come after us. And what does it signal to the rest of the world when America is complacent and America is weak? And so I do think that we need to pick and choose the involvement that America takes, and only do it when it's in America's best interest. I mean, ultimately, that is America's America's foreign policy should be in the interest of America and then the rest of the world. But for us to not have an ally in the Middle East, we have to realize that if the war is not fought in the Middle East, ultimately it will make it to our shores here, because that is what they are intending on doing. They are intending on coming here. They don't want to stop jihad with the Middle East only, and they've said that.
Yeah, there's interesting because it feels like there's a lot of pragmatism with a lot of the bad guys around the world, but It feels like that what we've been witnessing from Hamas lately is just there's no real pragmatism. It just really is truly ideological fervor to a level that's just, I think, really unrelatable for people in the United States. I just don't think ultimately all of us can identify with that. I think that that's a big disconnect.
Well, we've seen them bring their war here to our college campuses, right? You don't see the war on college campuses happening between the Ukrainians and the Russians.
Exactly
right? But you are seeing the war being brought here to American campuses when it comes to hating the Jews. And at the end of the day, the issue of the Palestine-Israeli conflict comes down to one thing. One side wants the other side dead, and that is the jihadists want to kill the Jews. They want no Jews in the land of Israel. And this is why they attack Jews here in the United States of America as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's really important to note that, and thank you for making that point. So you got an education, and then you found yourself at PragerU. When did you get hooked up with Dennis and Alan and what they were trying to do?
So I used to run a school. I taught K through 8th grade in California, and one day a mutual friend of ours who actually had kids who I educated, who I taught, approached me and said, "Do you happen to know somebody who understands digital media, who understands education, who can figure out how to use the power of the internet to get really important ideas out there?" And I kind of looked around and I said, well, those are a whole bunch of random traits, which I happened to have. At that point, I had a master's in education. I was a lot younger than Dennis and Alan. I still am. And so I really understood the digital media world, though I understand a lot more of it today. But it was certainly something that I grew up with. And given my background in Israeli intelligence, I had that little bug of discernment that you learn when you have to survive, I guess. And so the three of us came together and we figured out, how do we take this penicillin for the mind, this important idea of protecting American values and making sure that we fight for our kids, because our kids are not learning the great ideas that have made America this incredible country. And the three of us met at a cafe in Glendale, which is nearby where Dennis Prager's radio station was. And we just started talking about how do we reach millions of people? And it sounded like a grandiose idea to even have a classroom of 30,000 people watching our videos. And I remember the first time we released the video actually was the Middle East problem. Dennis made this 5-minute video explaining the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in 5 minutes. And the video went kind of viral. I got 30,000 views and we thought it was the most exciting thing ever. Of course, now we have a lot of views. Now we have 55 million views on some of our videos and even more. But at that point, it just seemed like a huge opportunity. And so like a typical entrepreneur, we kept trying different things. Some things worked, some things didn't work. And we just kept going and going. And, last year we garnered 2 billion views. We get about 28 million unique visitors to our website. We make all this kids content. And so you just kind of follow the path and keep doing what's right. And somehow you have more hours in the day to do more. And that's basically the PragerU story.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's interesting because as a early adopter to PragerU, because I am a Dennis super fan. I think I joke with Dennis and Alan, and they've never disputed this, that I must be the longest running Pragertopia subscriber, which is Dennis has a subscription, which basically all you do is you get the podcast commercial free and you get an email of what Dennis is reading. And I think that's all I get. I think I've been spending $7 a month on that for about 18 years. I think it's
well, you and Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, I think, has not missed a show.
I've had years where I did catch every single second of every show. There have been years where I can't say it's been every year, but there have been years where that's been the case. So I was aware of what he was doing, and I saw the videos, and I realized, you know what they do? They're not just for people who have never learned something. They're great refreshers, even for smart people who can't. You can't retain everything. You forget little details, and going back and trusting, where are you going to look stuff up? You can go to Wikipedia. Anything remotely political is just completely ruined over there. So where do you learn to brush up on basic facts? And so when I realized that this isn't just teaching an alternative to our corrupt and broken education system, this is a great refresher course for people 40, 50, 60 years old. I thought, of course, this is going to work. And then now, how many billions of views later, now you guys are one of the biggest stalwarts on the whole conservative movement.
Well, you would say we're an inoculation against bad ideas. And truly, you do need refreshers. But it's not only that. I mean, some things you can't be an expert on explaining, right? You may have the instinct or the intuition. You know what's right and what's wrong, but you won't have the perfect intellectual ammunition to express yourself. And so we spend hours and hours. It actually takes many hours to make a 5-minute video. But the purpose of that is for you to have it in your pocket in the case that you want to understand and re-articulate things that you may already believe, or you may want to talk to a friend and say, well, how about this alternative perspective for a change? You might, And so we have been helpful to people whose minds need to change. And there are many examples of that. We've been helpful to people like you who are amazing messengers who intuitively know the truth, but could use either a refresher or the intellectual sound bites or even the data to prove what is correct. And we've been just helpful to many parents and college students who are somewhere in between where, they have not had access to an alternative perspective. And by hearing another point of view, they're able to form their own thoughts. I mean, that really should be the point of education, where people can get exposed to things and make decisions.
So, but it's not just the 5-minute videos. That's a lot of your what you're known for. But there's so many other important products. You've got your podcast, which is Real Talk with Marissa, which I've been on, which is always so well done. I like to watch them on YouTube, but you can get them wherever you get your podcast. You've got tons of literature for children. You've got curricula. You've got cartoons. Share a few of the things you're working on that you're most excited about for people who might not be familiar.
So what's exciting about working for PragerU is that as a nonprofit, we can really just listen to what people need and not be driven necessarily by income. And so one of the things that we realized a few years ago is that young kids are not learning what they should be learning in schools. And people have asked us for many years to make 5-minute videos for children. And typical entrepreneur answer was, well, it's mission creep. We're not ready. Our bread and butter is 5-minute videos. But after the lockdowns happened, we just could not resist helping the parents. And so we listened and we launched this entire initiative of PragerU Kids. And never in my life, Alex, did I imagine that PragerU would be in schools. But it's unbelievable. We're in 9 states. We have
Amazing.
9 states that actually partner with PragerU, superintendents of education who have platformed our content and said, you know what you're doing meets our state standards. It stands on its own merits. Parents are writing in asking for it, so why not? They've opened our doors to PragerU. And so our content is actually in schools. And the more demand we see, the more we make. I mean, at this point, we're even making books, literacy books, to help Americans learn how to read again. And to your question about my podcast, there's something that, and I wonder if you relate to this as well. Over the last few years, I think we realized that those who run our government, those who represent us, owe us a deeper and longer explanation than a short soundbite. And I think it's what we want. We want to get to know the people who are behind the policies that are impacting and sometimes even dictating our lives. And we want to be able to ask why and who are you and what is your background and what is your agenda and where is your heart and what drives you and where does your courage come from? All of these things. And so you've seen all these podcasts actually come to market that are long form.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, well, we have all these incredible people coming into PragerU who are supporting us and working with us. And I get to know that they're incredible, right? I get to build some of my trust in them because I got to really ask them the hard questions of who they are really, not just the memorized sound bites that they've been given by whoever. And so these long form sit downs, I think, have allowed us to understand who we want representing us. Who are these people? And so that's the Real Talk show that I do. And it really goes hand in hand, I would say, with the kids' content that we make, because it has been a great driver for the awakening of parents to realize that there is more that can be done for their children, for our children, by parents learning more and understanding better what they can do, and by us providing more tools for parents to work with their children to get a better education.
Yeah, and you really do pull in some super interesting guests, which I think are really cool. On your recent shows, you've had Zachary Levi, who is a guy. He's an actor. People know him from the movies, and I bumped into him many times over the years, and I kind of felt like he was one of us, but he never really been coaxed out into the public, and now he is. So that's really terrific. You got one of the greatest interviews I could ever imagine, which is with Lindsay Snyder, who is the president of In-N-Out. Which, those of you who don't get to experience In-N-Out Burger on, it's better than you imagine. It is the best company. It's the happiest people. It's the cleanest environment. It's the only thing that's still cheap. Nothing in this country is cheap anymore. And it's just an amazing story. So you really latched in on, you've got a good niche of trying to get people who I think might be peripherally with us politically, but not necessarily political people always. These are people who are just experts. They're just knowledgeable. And I always relied on Dennis to point those people out to me when I was younger, because Dennis would have them on his show. And it's one of the things that is so important to do is we need to have an intellectual class. And the left can't hang with us on this stuff. They can't do 30 minutes. They can't do 2 hours. There's no one on the left who can do 3 hours with Joe Rogan. And it's not like even Rogan even has to do much. You just get people wound up for a while and then you unwind them. They're going to start saying insane stuff after a certain amount of time. Kamala Harris couldn't make it 15 minutes in an environment like that. So it's an interesting thing that I like, that we're taking a liking to these longer conversations on the right, because you can't just have sound bites. You've got to be able to back up what's really behind what matters to you.
You know what? When I bring people on my show, my goal is to bring interesting people who have something very good to bring to the world. I mean, you talk about Lindsay Snyder, for example.
Yeah.
She has so much goodness. So there's so much goodness that comes from learning from what she's done and how she's managed the company and what she's been through and her adversity. My goal is not to necessarily bring people who are like us. I actually like the fact that there are things that I have in common and things that I don't have in common with the people that come on. But ultimately, my goal is to inspire and wake people up. I think that I'd like to point out people who I think have a perspective that's worth hearing. Sometimes it's a perspective that I may not agree on, but I still think it's a perspective worth hearing because I personally feel like I've learned from them. It changed me. It moved me a little bit. And
so
to
cool.
me, that's what makes an interview really interesting. Not me kind of like shaking my head or nodding and agreeing to everything. But if they've moved me a little bit when I met them before and I bring them on the show and they move you a little bit when you watch them,
right,
then your intellectual boundaries have expanded. And that is, to me, something so fun, so interesting. And again, something that our education system refuses to do. And I think education should not be juvenile. It should not be left for just children. I think those of us who want to continue to feel this youthful spirit, we want to grow even in our 40s and 50s and 60s. And so that's my goal with the show Real Talk, is to just expand our intellectual horizons and just become better human beings. Better human beings will lead to better discernment.
I really like those things that are just natural outgrowths of stuff you're already doing, which is that you've got these people coming in, they're doing the videos. We all like the videos, but a lot of them travel in, they've already put in the effort. I mean, talking to you for half an hour would be super informative to your audience and wouldn't be that unpleasant for them. It's such an obvious thing. So I'm so glad it's going. And everyone should check that out where you get your podcast. Can I selfishly ask for an update on our friend Dennis?
Yes. Especially given that I actually have very decent news. Let me just say, I am so proud of Dennis Prager. I've always been so proud of Dennis Prager. I've just felt like God has brought him into my life for a reason, and working with him, this intellectual giant, for 13 years has been probably one of the greatest gifts of my life. But you really judge a person when they go through hard times. You really see who a person really is. And watching Dennis go through this injury, for those who haven't heard about the injury and are hearing about it for the first time, Dennis is okay, but he suffered a severe fall. He slipped and hit his head, and luckily nothing happened to Dennis Prager's brain, even though the hit was against his head. It was an absolute miracle that Dennis is still Dennis. He's still wise, smart, funny, and totally with it. But the injury to his spinal cord has been severe. So he hit his spinal cord at the C3, C4 area, which is the area that controls his breathing and his diaphragm. And so for the first couple of months, it's been 3 months now. For the first couple of months, the physicians were figuring out how does he regain function of his breathing. And in the beginning, it was a breathing tube, and then it was a CPAP machine that helped support his breathing. And he's been weaning off the breathing assistants and the breathing machines, which has now allowed him to basically have a trach collar and have it capped for a few hours during the day where he can actually speak. And so about 3 weeks ago, I walked into Dennis's room and I said, Dennis, what has it been like for you in your head for over 2 months? What did you learn? What have you been thinking about? Because remember, Dennis has been a public speaker for most of his adult life. And the entire time I spent with him that day was all about how grateful he is. And so do you imagine somebody who just experienced this severe fall and he can't move most of his body. And all he talks to me is about how grateful he is for his wife, how grateful he is for his children, how grateful he is for the community, the PragerU community and his audience that has been sending in letters. He is so focused on how grateful he is. He is still so Dennis. He does, we ask him how he is doing, Dennis will say, well, last year when you asked me how I was doing, I would say that I'm doing better than my country. Dennis has been following what is happening in the news and what's happening in our country. And he says, well, now the country is doing better than me. But Dennis knows that he is coming back. He is as disciplined as he could get. He works so hard every day, again, to work on his breathing so that he can have the tenacity to be able to broadcast again. That is his intention. And he has a goal and his sight is on the goal. He gets shaved every day. I bet you he would wear a tie every day if he could, but he has the trach collar right now. I'm sure the moment the trach collar comes out, a tie goes back right on.
Yeah.
And, he makes sure he gets his haircuts. And so he really is an inspiration. And I think that you look at Dennis at this very challenging time and how he's handling it, it is no surprise that he is this incredible person that we're, so grown accustomed to learn from.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for that. It's heartbreaking, but also beautiful. I did break down, ask Alan if I could go see him. I resisted for months, but I asked him. So I'll keep the audience posted if that happens. Obviously,
yeah.
Dennis is one of my personal heroes on one hand, and everyone should support PragerU. It's a great way to keep Dennis in your thoughts every day. So PragerU.com. For that, I donate every year, and not enough. Maybe if the show gets bigger, I can even donate more. But it is a worthy cause in many, many ways because it is Dennis's everlasting legacy. Not to mention his Bible commentaries are terrific as well. So that's another thing that if you need your daily dose of Dennis, those are good ways to get it. Marissa, I want to talk to you about the Department of Education. You mentioned it's really an interesting and beautiful sentiment from Dennis that he's not doing as well as the country now, which is normally probably he thought the inverse. He probably thought that he was doing better than the country. Now the country's doing great, but I want to get from someone who really understands it, some specifics of what you think what are your anticipations? What are your hopes and dreams for the Department of Education under President Trump?
I think that one of the things that we need to be careful about is the fear mongering that is out there, right? I have friends who listen to shows other than yours, sadly, and they have been taught to be afraid of anything except for a big government. And so when the government shrinks, they think that means that they will not have the services that they need. And when they're hearing that there are conversations about the dismantling of the Department of Education, they think that it means that there'll be no more education in America, where actually the contrary is true. And so I think that for those who are so concerned, what does the Department of Education even do? And do we even need it? I think this is a great opportunity to clarify. What did the United States of America spend $268 billion on last year? The Department of Education spent that. And where does the money go? Does it actually go to producing curriculum or content or better teachers or better services? And the answer is no. It's a giant bureaucracy with 4,400 employees that basically sit there and write checks to then have another shadow government of 48,000 members that work for the monstrosity to, again, spend more money. And if you look at the literacy rates, the math rates, I mean, everybody knows, anybody that sends their kids to a government school knows that the kids are not doing well. And if you think about those numbers and you ask yourself, where does the money go? You have to come to the conclusion that the answer is corruption. Now, people think that there is only corruption in Latin America, right? Why is Latin America failing? Oh, there's corruption. There is corruption in the United States of America. And one of the most egregious areas where we've seen corruption in America is in the Department of Education. But because we care so much about children and because we know that education is important, we've been manipulated to think that as long as we throw more money blindly at bureaucrats that refuse to even give us any sort of sense of what is happening there, there's no transparency, there's no accountability. They simply attack you when you dare to ask any questions about where the money is going. You have to raise an eyebrow and say, is there something nefarious here? And my answer is yes. And the only way to clean up a bureaucracy like that is to completely dismantle it. And that starts by it starts by asking serious questions, and it's by removing people who've been hired to basically protect those who are taking our money and robbing our children of an education.
So where do you think the dismantling, what's the best approach? Is it eliminate it? Is it my joke was fire everyone in the building and you can leave one person? I think you should leave a four-spirit furry, just someone who just hits all your woke boxes, just to make fun of the other side. So we'll just have one person, the entire Department of Education.
So it doesn't get rebuilt again?
Yeah. So it'll never get rebuilt. If someone totally incompetent, there's one but we could say a woke person, like we have 100% four-spirit representation in the Department of Education. Or maybe there's something good that can be done. Is there any good that can be done? Is there any point of having a Department of Education on a federal level?
Yes. So on the federal level, the answer is no, because mostly what they do is disperse checks. And so if Americans would like to give funding from on the federal level to the states, the Treasury can do that, right? The Treasury can actually disperse checks. So let's say Title I or the support of special needs students. If the federal government wants to disperse checks, that can be done through the Treasury. You don't need a secondary additional department to just write checks. Personally, I think that one of the biggest expenditures of the Department of Education has been the loan forgiveness program. I personally don't think that Americans should be paying for every single loan for all Americans. There are many loans that have been taken for frankly, college degrees that our society doesn't want, doesn't value, and doesn't need. So should a plumber in the United States pay for a degree, for the loan forgiveness of a degree of somebody who is going to study, I don't know, balloon blowing or theater studies, or is that even fair? And should we have a vote in where we're spending our money? Well, as long as you have a Department of Education that is just giving these blanket loan forgiveness programs, you have no say in where you're spending your money. And we're talking about not a little sum of money. We're talking about billions of dollars that hardworking Americans are responsible to pay for degrees that our society simply doesn't need. So those are some of the major issues these are some of the major expenditures that the Department of Education has been enlisted in. One is the Title I, Title I being, kids who can't afford an education. And so we support the states financially with kids who need financial support. That could be done through the Treasury, which, by the way, with school choice, instead of going directly to the states, it could go directly to the parents, where parents can actually choose schools that perform better for their kids. This is even a stronger recommendation for kids who have special needs. If you're a family with a special needs child, I mean, we worked with a child who was blind here in California. They could not find a government school, even though the funding was there. They could not find a government school that could actually support their needs. And so they wanted to go to a private school that could support their needs, but they couldn't use the government funds for that. So imagine being able to actually provide families with a voucher where they can take their special needs child to an actual special needs school that would help them, that would benefit them the most, right? So that's a huge amount of money that is expensed through the Department of Education. And the third big whammy, as I mentioned, is the loan forgiveness program, which if you actually privatize, the market would end up supporting degrees that our society actually needs, not degrees. Many of them are woke degrees that are hurting our society. So those are some examples.
It's so interesting. And it's like this. There's a model that can be done statewide. I was looking at California where, so much of our property taxes go to the education system, and the education system is mostly not usable. I happen to live in an area where maybe I can use it, but most of LA, you can't use it really, but they do educate a lot of legal aliens. That's a huge part of the budget because it's very hard to educate people who are not assimilated, who don't speak the language, who might be ESL or bilingual, and a lot of bureaucrats. Obviously, they always try to have as many bureaucrats as possible, one bureaucrat for every teacher if they can. And you still can't. So where's all this money going? It's just being wasted. And could I just take my portion and put it towards my own kids' education? Could we do that or not?
Well, if we had a voucher system, you could, which I think would be most fair. And again, this can be done through the Treasury, right? The Treasury could just set up a voucher system. But we're spending double money by having bureaucrats in the Department of Education, 44,000 plus another 4,400 plus another 48,000 across America. So why do we need all these people to write checks? If you want to have vouchers, just go through the Treasury, and then families can choose the best school for their kids and have some competition there. But, Alex, the point is when you wonder why are they fighting so hard to call me a right-wing extremist or all kinds of, call you all kinds of names if you advocate for school choices, because they have a lot to lose. They have $268 billion to lose. And so they're going to put the biggest fight they can, because there are a lot of people who have made a lot of money off of us turning a blind eye and allowing this Department of Education to grow. There are all these supposed research projects. Like there's $100 million was spent last year in research projects for DEI. You want to spend $100 million on that? Nobody wants that. So I think that the reason they're fighting so hard to attack us and to slander us is because they know how much they have to lose. And I think that once America wakes up with the help of Doge, seeing where the money is actually going, and also just with the experience, like places like Florida, where they have more school choice, where kids of low-income families can choose schools that actually cater to their needs, and kids who come from all kinds of special need backgrounds can go to specialized schools, then you can start seeing that innovation that we've been looking to have here in America. I mean, you talk about PragerU. One of the reasons why we make everything free is because we know that once money came into the picture, there was so much corruption. And so we produce all of our content completely for free. And it is, and it is doable because Americans care about education. Conservatives do care about education. But I think that what the Department of Education has been doing has been just, they're the biggest bullies in school. They're just bullies. They're robbing us blind.
Yeah, they really are. And it's interesting how competition is not introduced. Every once in a while, we'll see our test scores are going down, and then we'll go, oh, wow, that's too bad. And then we do nothing different. And it feels like there's no pressure being applied from anywhere aside from you guys, really. I mean, maybe there's a couple other exceptions, but it just feels like, for the most part, you're the only ones trying to hold these schools accountable. You're trying to get PragerU's curricula approved in various states, and you've had a lot of successes, but you've had way more resistance than you should. It should be very welcome. Can you describe that process for us and how it's going?
So PragerU is in 9 different states. We have partnerships with superintendents of education and boards of education that basically say it's optional. We don't believe in mandating the PragerU content, but it does align with state standards. And if you would like to show it in your classrooms, it's also available to parents. One of our philosophies is you should never, ever agree to produce a content for a child that the parent cannot have access to. And by the way, if you notice, Scholastic, Brain Pop, many of our competitors, they will produce one journey for the parent and another journey for the educator. And you got to ask why. What is it that you have to hide? And so the PragerU model has proven that you can actually produce content that is available both to the parent and to the educator, and everybody can use the same content. There is no gaslighting. I bring up Florida again. Florida has been such a model for success, and we're gonna have to watch them over the next few years. And it's the same thing in Louisiana, where they're climbing because they're involving the parents, because they're giving more school choice, because parents can have vouchers and schools find schools that are better for them. You're starting to see schools open up because there is competition and there is opportunity over there. And as we're arming the parents with what it is that they should be looking for. I can't tell you, Alex, how many parents have written in saying, can I show this book to my child? Do I need to pre-read this book to my child? Do I need to preview this movie for my child? It is exhausting. It is exhausting. But the answer these days is yes, because you don't know what you can trust. You don't know that the products that are created by Scholastic or any of the other woke companies, whether it's right for your child or not. And so I think it is teaching us that the answer is yes. We do need to know what is going into our child's brain. Just like before, you pick up that mac and cheese and you look at the ingredients before you cook it, and you want to understand what's going into your child's tummy. You do need to know what's going into your child's brain. You can't rely on these government bureaucracies to do it.
So let's use my family as an example. So I've got all my kids, the three who can physically touch and hold books, like books. The eldest he's in the first grade, and he's a very good reader for his age, and he really loves reading. He's always holding a book. And, he's got one book series he really likes, a famous book series, and it's fine. It's not super high class, but it's smart enough, and it's fine. There's a very similar looking series that's put out by Scholastic. And I know from talking to you that if it's Scholastic, I can't trust it. I got to try to push them elsewhere. But is there a central database? Like, how would we know? How should I can't go and read every single book in the bookstore before I pick stuff out for him, because he hoovers them up. So what do I do other than, of course, use PragerU's products? We've got tons of Otto's Tales books on the bookshelves. But what do you recommend to families like that?
I think you need to know who are the organizations that are producing the content. So do you need to read every book in advance? No, but you know what PragerU stands for. And there are other organizations that stand for your values. I think the important point to keep in mind here is that for a very long time, conservatives and maybe even libertarians said, well, we don't really want to go into teaching character development. We don't want to indoctrinate. We don't want to teach. We just want to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that is a big problem because we've created a huge vacuum. When it comes to literacy and social studies, you can't just not teach any sort of character. You can't just say, well, I'm going to give you a book, but it's going to have no character development in it. And so what we need to do is really step in and say, well, actually, when you're learning literacy, what are those books that are being taught? I mean, you talk about Scholastic. I have here, I think I told you about Melissa, the book last year or a few years ago that received the award from Scholastic. Of course, they were so successful. They came out with Rick. Rick is a girl that decided to then become a boy. And this is the second book to Melissa. Melissa was George. George was George.
Right. So these are, for those of you in the listening audience, this is a book clearly about transgender,
right?
Who I'm sure is treated perfectly like just a pristine individual.
No, this is like the ideal. So they'll idealize this concept of transitioning between a boy to a girl and a girl to a boy, and this is 4th, 5th grade literacy level, right? So do you need to read all of it? No, but you should know
that's grooming.
That's
what that is.
This is grooming, but you should know who the authors are, and you should know who the publishers are, and you should be very, very careful and not assume that because you picked up this book at a government school, you can trust it. The opposite is the case. And so you do need to know who is feeding your child's brain and what is the content that is going into these kids' classrooms. Now, we've been so focused on the school boards and getting better school board members, and we've been focused on state standards, right? We've been very focused on that. The issue is that supplementary content is such a big market because if you are teaching literacy, I say this again, if you're teaching literacy 5th, 6th, 7th grade, you have to recommend books. And so we as conservatives can't say, oh, well, we don't want to indoctrinate. We don't want to set any sort of set of values. We just want literacy. literacy meaning what? What is it that we are okay with our children reading? And so my proposition is that we advocate for an industry that makes clean books, and we support an industry that produces clean books, and we hold that industry accountable so that you as a parent, Alex, can say to yourself, I know that if XYZ is making books, they stand for the values which I would like to support, and that is what I'm willing to see in my child's hands, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to step back and say reading, writing, and arithmetic only, and realize that it's not pragmatic. We do need to advocate for what we believe. And that is the big mistake that I think conservatives have made. We've been so afraid to stand on our own values and say what it is that we actually believe in because we didn't want to appear as if we were indoctrinating.
You know, one thing that's interesting there is with the trans issue, where we just had this real flashpoint recently. It felt like that this is one that it seemed unwinnable for a few minutes, where it seemed like the left thought they had us in checkmate, that it was a small, marginalized group of people. And if you're attacking them, it's just because you're cold and insensitive and you're not sympathetic. And we all saw Caitlyn Jenner, and Caitlyn Jenner went through 30 years of torment, and he seems like kind of a good guy, and he is a good guy. I've talked to him. He's a nice person, and it's a kind of votes properly. And so you're really not that cold, are you? And then all of a sudden, it's this huge cultural contagion where every other kid is LGBTQIA for spirit. And they're all of a sudden brothers and sisters are swapping genders. And it's every you come into school and you're changing your pronouns every day, and men are just podiuming all 3 spots at the female track events. You're like, what happened here? And something snapped. And then we all decided we don't like it anymore. Was there a clear moment when that happened? Because it was one of the most whirlwind cultural phenomena I've ever seen.
Yes, the clear moment was when we stood for truth, and we were not afraid to do so. That is the thing. When we create a vacuum, all kinds of isms come in. That's when you saw the isms come in. Environmentalism, that was when I was a teacher. I taught Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. Then there's transgenderism. All the isms come in when we are too afraid to stand up for truth, when we are afraid to be labeled all kinds of names, indoctrinators and right-wing extremists. And the moment we said, you know what, you can call me whatever you want. I'm going to speak for truth because I'm going to draw the line. That is the moment that we started winning, when we had enough courage to not just think it and feel it, but actually execute it and go ahead and stand for it. And I think that as long as we continue to stand for truth, we'll continue winning. It is only once we cower in the face of truth that we lose.
So what do you say to families who have some sort of a trans issue with in their school? The school's still not bad enough where they feel like they want to leave the school, but it's very risky, because if you get some woke social services people involved, I've heard horror stories of people getting their kids taken from them, all because they're standing up to the school's insistence on trans indoctrination. What is the process where you think there's too much of the trans grooming going on within the classroom, and you need to speak up on your child's behalf or on behalf of other children?
At what point do you think, if the house is on fire, you should take your child out of the house, Alex?
Pretty early. Pretty early,
right? Because the flame spreads real fast. And, this is is there anything more important in your life than raising your children?
No.
Is there anything more important?
No.
Is it going to work? Is it achieving social status? Is it staying within your friend group? What could be more important than that? And so I would say that if you get a whiff of these bad isms in the school, and you are actually feeling like you can't push against it, then the house is on fire. You got to yank your child out of it. And listen, I am very sympathetic to how hard it is. I am very sympathetic to how hard it is to, find a new friend group or be ostracized. I live in Los Angeles. I'm not immune to it, and I totally see that. But I also want to remind you that that every single parent I've met who had a child who either transitioned, almost transitioned, or has been in that environment, every single one of them has said to me, I wish I pulled my child out of there sooner, because it was that much harder when I waited longer. It is truly an ism. It is a religion, and there is social contagion to it. And it is very, very dangerous. It's very dangerous. In Los Angeles, it's particularly dangerous, no matter how much the doctors, actually, there are many local doctors who are trying to fight against it. and they're being threatened. And so you know that if the doctors are being threatened, the house is on fire and you got to pull your kid out. Just figure out a way. Move if you have to. Homeschool, that's ideal. Whatever it is, you cannot subject your child to those flames, in my opinion.
All right. So I want to ask a couple of pointed questions because this is a real opportunity here. So first of all, if Linda McMahon ever gets tired of the job, you have to be next on the list for education secretary. Would you do it?
I would be a horrible politician because I like to speak my mind all the time.
Best, though. Those are the best
I
politicians.
Just don't know.
Those are our favorites.
I don't know how
Those are
I'll
our
do
favorites.
as a politician. I just the amount of troublemaking might be too much.
You'd be a bureaucrat also. You wouldn't technically be a politician. So
I could never be a bureaucrat. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe if the big guy says, I need your help, we need you. But let's just do a role play. If you're in charge, what are you doing first of all? I want to go macro, then I'm going to work in towards micro. Macro, what are you putting in place, Department of Education? What are the main goals for you?
So if I were in charge, I would start shrinking the Department of Education slowly. I don't think it can be done overnight, but I would try to privatize the student loan program because I think there's a lot of opportunity there for great students to get great loans and for bogus loans to stop being underwritten by the American public. And then secondary, I would enact school choice ASAP because I think there are no better decision makers than the guardians and the parents on where to send their kids to school. So those would be the first two things that I would do. And it's cut down the fat. I don't think that you need 4,400 bureaucrats writing checks.
Right. Okay. So now let's talk for the school board level. If you're involved in your school board locally, what are you looking for that's positive? What are things you need to eradicate that's negative that you're seeing at a widespread level?
I think we need to look at the teacher programs, and that needs a complete revamp. There is a very good chance that you will find better teachers who are actually not credentialed. And I repeat this again.
Wow.
Non-credentialed teachers might be better than most of the credentialed teachers because many of the credentialed teachers have gone through what I call the teacher seminaries or the teacher colleges, which are the head of the snakes. They have produced the pedagogy of the oppressed, Pablo Freire's education stooges, which have now made it into our schools. And so I think school board members should revisit who they're hiring and open up the gates to hiring better professionals that can do a better job. I mean, there are mathematicians out there who could probably teach better math than what some of these teacher colleges are producing. Do you know that you need less than 14 hours of classroom instruction on how to teach math in order to graduate from a teacher college?
I can think of one math teacher I had. There's no evidence she had 14 hours of training when she was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was far less than that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, disconnecting entirely from the teachers' unions as much as you can.
Yeah, huge.
And hire great teachers, hire based on merit and reward based on merit. There are great Americans out there who can get back into the classrooms if we just move the bureaucrats out of the way and revamp the teacher colleges and possibly just completely get away with it.
You can really doge it where you're cutting so much fat, you give raises to the good teachers to actually incentivize people to get back into that line of work. And we could all still save money, conceivably. So if you do it,
100%.
Yeah, it's okay. So now speak to local schools, principals, teachers in the audience. We know we have many of them. What are your recommendations for this sort of strange environment where we're transitioning away from woke in some of the schools? What are the best things they can do?
Well, you would hope that these schools would do what I suggest, but I don't know if it's in the bureaucrats' best interest, but in the community's best interest is to involve the parents as much as possible.
Yes,
a parent should never hear, or this product is only for the teacher to review, but you as a parent cannot see it. I think that involving the parents as much as possible in what the child is learning. I'm a big believer in homework because I think it's a great way for parents to actually see what's happening in the classroom. And it's a great way for parents to actually see that they can work with their children. We've been told this idea that as a parent, you're not smart enough to educate your child, which is absolutely silly. Of course you can. And so opening the window wide open for parents to get involved, I think is a number one thing that needs to be done. And, you know, there are a lot of people within our communities who would make wonderful teachers. And so creating different programs like the charter schools are doing, where people can have a second career and become educators after having some life experience is an incredible way to get a very sophisticated workforce back in front of our children who just deserve better. So the human capital is a massive issue. I know that when I ran a school, that's been a massive issue. Solving the human capital issue of finding great teachers and getting rid of the bogus credentialing programs is one of the things that both community schools can do and can be done on the school district level. Learn from the charter schools.
This is a tough one though, because you got to contend with the unions in that, because I'm up for, if you get, like, let's say they put someone like you at the Department of Education, which they're not doing yet. But I'm saying someone charismatic who gets it, who's clearly in the trenches with them. You could run a recruiting effort to recruit great teachers, and it would work. And people would come out of the woodwork that, like, I had one teacher in high school who had sold a tech startup and was basically retired. And he actually was younger and in great shape in his 30s. But he had made enough money and he wanted to teach. So he just taught, because that's how, since he didn't really need to try to make a $10 million, already had it. So like those types of people, you would find them. But then they're going to start having to deal with the unions, and they're going to go, I don't want to do this. Like, this is not why I'm spending all this time when I'm getting up early in the morning, I'm doing homework, I'm grading papers. Like I'm not doing that and have oversight from these idiots.
Yeah, that's right. And they don't want to go through the DEI training programs and they don't want to do all the nonsense. But many of us were born with that teacher bug in us. It's just fun.
Yeah.
For me, it's fun being in front of a classroom and working with students and pouring knowledge into them and hearing from them. And I mean, I'm sure there are people who are listening to this who just feel that flame, just being ignited, because it's like, how much money do you need to make? But spending time in that youthful environment is so incredible. But the biggest bullies in school, the teachers' unions and the credentialing programs, have created walls against around our children and around people who can do an amazing job. And so, what could the Department of Education do instead of giving money to the NEA, which, by the way, it does? That's insane. The National Educators Assembly, one of the largest teachers' unions in America with over 2.7 million members, receives money from the Department of Education. And again, one of the additional benefits of dismantling the Department of Education is not giving money to the biggest bullies in our country, the teachers' unions. You cut that money out, you create all kinds of incentive programs for people to come back into the workforce and become educators and enjoy it and not go through DEI credentialing programs, but actually teaching, ways to prove that they can actually teach a classroom. Imagine that. Imagine what a rocket that would put our American students on.
Amazing. So, Marissa, let's say there's someone in the audience, I can't imagine who it would be, but there's got to be someone who was unfamiliar with you, unfamiliar with PragerU, and they're loving what they're hearing. What do you recommend to them today? What should they be doing today to go and get involved and see what you have to offer?
So PragerU produces 40 pieces of content a week. There is something there for you, no matter where you are, on the left or on the right, somewhere in the middle, whether you're 104 years old or 4 years old, there is something for you. So go to PragerU.com and subscribe so that we can make sure that we send you all of our content. You can download our app if you have a smartphone. If you have children at home, you can download our app onto your TV so they don't have to watch the garbage on YouTube, but they can watch clean, non-woke content. And so follow us on all our socials. Sadly, we're at the belly of the beast on every social media platform out there too.
Yeah, you have to. You got to do it. We do it too. It's so reluctant. It's so funny because it brings up my last question. So I've got to outsource a lot of that to my team because I don't like being on social media platforms. But I found that as the world's changed, I need to be more front facing and be out there and be on camera and stuff. And you do such a terrific job at it. But one thing that I think is very cool and classy about you is I feel like you got dragged into it. I don't feel like you're dying to be in front of a camera. And and you do such a great job when you're in front of it, but this is sort of new for you, I'm guessing. What do you think of it so far, kind of being a public person?
I think you never know what God plans for you, and you just need to listen hard and serve. And certainly being in front of the camera or being on stage was not something I ever thought I'd be doing. I really saw myself as just mostly in a classroom or an operations person. But you do something as many times as you can, and eventually you get a little better at it and you get a little less nervous, and you just keep listening to how you can push yourself. I say to the PragerU team members, do what you fear. Just keep going at it. And there's something very fun about doing what you fear and landing on your 2 feet and just conquering it. And so that's what it's been like for me.
Isn't that something where you sometimes feel like you're most alive at those moments? Not when you're doing what you know best, when you're doing something you know least or is the hardest. Sometimes when you actually, I feel like I'm really getting the true human experience in those moments.
Yeah, Alex, I think humans are like rubber bands. We're meant to be stretched. And just laying there on a table without any sort of stretch is not the purpose of what we've been made to do here on this earth.
Well, Marissa Streit, Real Talk with Marissa, wherever you get your podcasts and YouTube. Dennis said that he believes that soon, if not already, PragerU will be more valuable and essential to the American education apparatus than Harvard University. And I think the first time I heard him say that, I thought that was cool but semi-insane. And now I think it's automatic. I think it's guaranteed if it hasn't happened already. And so if you guys aren't on board now, you're going to want to get on board because this thing is a rocket ship, and I'm happy to play a little part in promoting it. So thank you, Marissa. Thanks to your whole team, which is terrific. And thanks to all of you in the Alex Marlow Show audience. Thanks to producer Misty. Marissa, any final words before we sign off?
We're just so grateful to you, Alex. Dennis loves you. I love you. We love what you do at Breitbart. I know that you've been through a lot of grief with the censorship, and you just keep hauling, and we need media companies like yours. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks again, Marissa. And thanks to the Alex Marlow Show audience. Tell 10,000 friends and family members about us. Talk to you tomorrow.